Hello and welcome. I'm Dave. Today we add what I believe is the most crucial part of building any application, the data foundation. We'll be creating a Neon Postgres database and using Drizzle ORM to communicate between the database and our Next.js code. I'll provide a link to all resources in the description. And I'll also provide a link to join my Discord server where you can discuss this Next.js Full Stack project with fellow students, ask questions, and help each other out. Hey guys, a big shout out and thank you to Sentry for making this full stack Next.js educational video series possible. Sentry is defining debuggability in full stack web applications, and I consider Sentry to be an essential part of my tech stack. From error reporting, logging, and tracking to identifying performance issues with tracing, to user session replays, and much more, Sentry will help you write and ship code that delivers exceptional user experiences. Follow the Sentry links in the video description or just visit Sentry.io and use the code davegray to get 3 months of the Sentry team plan for free. In this Next.js Full Stack Project series, I'm using the same tech stack that I've been working with on a major project at my job over the past year. For viewers, students, and subscribers that have asked what I work with on a daily basis, this is definitely the tutorial series to watch. I've got VS Code open, and our starter code today is the completed code from Lesson 2. This is Lesson 3. Okay, I want to open up the user stories once again and visit those as we start Lesson 3. So I'll click up above here so I can press Control-B and hide the file tree. Then if you remember from the previous lesson, I'm using an extension called Markdown Preview Enhanced. So I hope you installed that along with me. If not, you can just add X's and look at this file. But I'm going to press Control-K and then the letter V, and it opens up this same file in a checklist over here on the right. So what did we complete in the last lesson? Well, if we look at number 3, we added a passwordless employee login to the app. So yes, we did that with kind. I'll check that off. What else? Maybe number 6, provide a logout option. Yes, we did that as well. So I'll check that off. Number 7, require users to log in at least once per week. We adjusted our tokens for the sessions in our kind dashboard, and so now it only requires users to log back in about once per week. So we can also check that off. Now let's look at number 8, provide a way to remove employee access as soon as possible if needed. Now this isn't something we added to our code. Being a small business, this is something we're just going to show our stakeholder how to log into the kind dashboard and disable or delete a user, one of his employees, as soon as possible when he needs to. So yes, that is a possibility with kind, so we're going to go ahead and check that off. Now if we scroll down, there's one more to look at, and that is number 13. Users can have employee, manager, or admin permissions. We did set those permissions up in the kind dashboard, so we can check that off as well, and we'll be applying those to different routes and pages as the features are added to the application, because managers and admins will be able to access some of those features that the standard employee or tech at the computer repair shop cannot access. So we will use those, but we did apply those now. So I'm going to go ahead and check those off. Now we're going to add a database today, and of course add Drizzle ORM to communicate with our Neon Postgres database, and that will enable us, I should say, to check a few more of these off at the beginning of the next lesson. Now I've got a blank tab open in my Google Chrome browser, and I need to enter in this URL to go to Neon. Now follow along with me. It's fyi.neon.tech/davegray. And that takes us to the Neon website where we can set up our Postgres database. Neon is awesome. Now with a free account, you can set up to 10 different projects. So 10 different databases, all in a free account. So let's go ahead and choose sign up if it's you. For me, I already have an account, so I'm just going to choose log in. Now, if I log in, I need my email and password. Signing up, of course, you'll need to provide an email and create a password. So I'll just meet you at the dashboard after we sign in here and I should be at the dashboard. Here I am, ready to create a project. So I'm going to name this project. And of course, once you're signed in, you create the project with the name that you want to use, but we'll probably both use the same name for this project, which is Computer Repair Shop. And now the database name, NeonDB, we can just go with that default. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to choose AWS because this is in beta still here for Azure. I'm sure there's no issue with it, and I've had great experience with Neon. However, I want to use something that's not in beta. I'm also going to choose US East, which is the closest to where I am, which is near Kansas and Kansas City. Choose the region that's closest to you. After that, I don't really need any advanced options, so I'm just going to click Create Project. And now it's going to ask me another question here, confirm or customize auto-scaling settings for your free project. Set my range. I'm just going to go with the default right here, so I don't need a higher limit for a paid plan. Again, this should all be free for this project. We'll just confirm. And it looks like we're ready to go. It says we can create a dev branch. Now, Neon does offer a branching system that you can do a lot with, and this is very beneficial for a real-world production project where you would have a production branch and a dev branch to work from. They would both have different connection strings, like the string that you see down here. And right now, we're just kind of a solo developer, if you will. Say we're just a sole proprietor creating websites or applications for different people if we're in that role with this computer shop project. So let's just go with this main branch for now where we can create this project because we don't have anything already deployed. This would be important though if this project was already deployed or a previous project and we needed to come back in and work on it and we didn't want to change, of course, the working data. We would want to create a dev branch and work from that. Right now, we're going to need this connection string. So you can copy the snippet. Notice the password is actually hidden here, so that's good. So we can just copy that snippet. There are some other features that you can look at while you're here exploring Neon as well. So instant branches of your database for each pull request. That's something that's awesome, again, as you would add features in a real-world production scenario with a team. So you would want a branch of the database that you were working with that wouldn't impact what was already deployed and customers were using. A Neon branch for every preview in your CI/CD pipeline. That's continuous integration, continuous deployment, and that's a cool feature as well. Keep your branch up to date, so they show how to update your dev branch. So if you'd created one here, if we had that, we'd be able to reset from main, and that would reset our dev branch and get the latest information from the main branch. You can invite team members, very useful again if you're on a team. Now, this is something you might be interested in here too. Join the Neon community. You can follow them on X. They have their own Discord. So explore Neon here. Don't just do what I'm doing. Go ahead and explore the other features. But I'm telling you, for this project, all we really need is the main branch and this connection string. And we copied that snippet down here, so we should be good to go. Okay guys, now I'm in the Neon docs under getting started, and I'm on step 2 here, connect Neon to your stack, which is what we're going to do, connect the Neon database to our code. What I want to point out here is that that connection string that we just copied, we're going to want to put that in our .env.local file that we have back in our project. And as I scroll down here it shows the variable. So you want to wrap that connection string in quotes as they show here. Now this isn't the string you want, so don't copy this. They're just showing how to actually put it in your environment variable file, so your .env.local. So you're going to set all caps here, database underscore URL equals, and then in quotes, paste in that connection string. Let's go back to VS Code, and of course you can't see my .env.local, and I shouldn't see yours. It should be listed in your git ignore because it should never be sent to GitHub. But let's go back to VS Code, put that information that you copied, the actual connection string, back from your dashboard like we had right here. So you've copied that string, and then you're going to put it in this format in your .env.local in VS Code. Okay guys, I've added it to my .env.local and we're ready to move on. And one thing I need to address here is if you're already using a stable version of Next.js 15, say you're watching this in the future, you've got a stable Next.js 15, you've got a stable React 19 in your package.json. In other words, you don't have the release candidates like you see here in my package.json, then you can skip this section. But what I want to bring up is that Next.js 15, just since I created the last video, is now stable as of October 21st, 2024. Now, that doesn't mean React 19 is stable, but Next.js 15 is. It's going to take a while for all the dependencies to catch up to these changes, and so we're still going to need that legacy peer deps flag on everything. But we can go ahead and upgrade now to the stable version of Next.js 15 if you're watching this around the time I've created this video. So I'm going to do that here with the code mod that they have provided, the new automated upgrade command line interface. So this is a great way to do it. We'll just copy this npx command right here. And from there, we'll go back to VS Code and go to the terminal window. Okay, back in VS Code, I'm going to press Control and the backtick to open up that terminal window. And then I'm going to paste those commands right in here, this npx at next/codemod at canary upgrade latest. And I'll just press enter. We don't need the legacy peer deps flag here. Now it's going to take us through a little bit of a wizard on this upgrade to the stable version of Next.js 15. So okay to proceed, that is a yes. Just press enter. It'll ask a few more questions here. It detected the release candidate versions we had. Do I want TurboPack for next dev? Yes, I do. So a capital Y. That should be faster now than the Webpack that Next.js had been using. So it's upgrading everything. Don't worry about the warning messages that you get here and everything else that you see. It should do a good job of upgrading. And when it's complete, we'll check our package.json again to make sure that we have the stable version. There we go. It says, please review the local changes and read the Next.js 15 migration guide to complete the migration. There are definitely some changes in Next.js 15, and we'll be talking about those as this series goes on. But right now we can control click to go to this website. I'll go ahead and say, yes, I trust that, and we can open. But one thing that it says on this website, and this is different from the blog post that we were on, it looks very similar, but one thing that it says on this website, this good to know section, it says, if you see a peer dependencies warning, you may need to update React and React DOM to the suggested versions, or you can essentially do what we were doing with the release candidates, and that is use this legacy peer deps flag. That is a good way to do it. Like I said, a lot of the dependencies are still going to be playing catch up, and they won't support some of these changes yet. So as we still add dependencies in this series, I'm probably going to have to lean on this legacy peer deps flag because Next.js is so new. But if we look back in our package.json now, we can see Next is at 15.0.1 here, shortly after it was released. So this is absolutely the latest stable version of Next.js 15. React and React DOM 19 are still release candidate versions. And with the stable version of Next.js 15 in place, we're now ready to add Drizzle to our project. So let's go ahead with npm I, then Drizzle -ORM. Then we need at Neon database /serverless. This is the driver that is used to connect to Neon. And then we'll say -- legacy -peer -deps. And it should install both of those for us. So Drizzle ORM and the Neon serverless driver. And it looks like I made a typo. And yes, I did. Easy to do when I'm not copying those in. So I left an A out of database. Let me hit the up arrow, come back in here and add that letter A. So database serverless legacy peer deps. Press enter. Give this another try. It should install as expected. And yes, it installed no problem once I got rid of my typo. Now we have some dev dependencies to add as well. So npm I, and then we want a -D, and that makes this a dev dependency install. And from there, let's add Drizzle -kit, and we'll use Drizzle kit to generate SQL, if you will, and migrate that to our Neon database. Now, besides Drizzle kit, we're also going to use TSX, which allows us to run TypeScript files in a Node environment. Then we're going to use .env. Now, Next.js doesn't usually require .env to read those environment variables. However, the Drizzle commands that we run are really command line commands. And so it runs outside of the area where Next.js usually handles that for us. And that means we do need .env as we work with Drizzle. So these three are the dev dependencies. And once again, we need -- legacy - peer - deps. Press enter, and it should add these three to the list of our dev dependencies once they get installed. Okay, don't worry about the warnings up here for now. We'll close that out. Let's take a look at the dependencies that we got. So here we have Drizzle ORM as expected. Up here is the Neon database serverless driver. Down here, we should have TSX. We should also have DrizzleKit, and we should have .env under dev dependencies. So everything's installed as expected. And now we're ready to create our database connection. So let's scroll up and click on our source directory. Now inside the source directory, I'm going to create a new directory, and I'm just going to call it DB for database. And you can see I'm using VS Code -icons as an extension, and that gives these nice cool little icons here, and you can see it kind of gives it the database icon. Now, I have seen others prefer to organize their files and directories differently. And so some may decide to put the database or DB folder outside of the source directory. I prefer to have mine inside the source directory, but not inside the app directory where we're actually routing things. The app route, I want it separate, just like I have my components and lib. So this is the DB directory, and now it's going to contain some of our special files that we connect with that use Drizzle and we connect to Neon. So one is index.ts, and this is where we create our connection. So I'm going to import Drizzle, and that needs to come from drizzle-orm/neon-http. Okay, after we got Drizzle, let's import Neon, and that should come from @Neon database serverless. That looks right. And now finally, we need to import config, and that comes from .env. Okay, now we'll set up the config. We're keeping all of our environment variables in our .env local. So here we set the path and we say, hey, look in our .env.local file when you're pulling out environment variables and when we're using .env here. After that, we want to define SQL. So const SQL equals, and we'll call Neon that we imported. Now we need to get that connection string. So that's process.env.database_URL. Now TypeScript won't be happy until we just give it the exclamation mark, which says, hey, we know that value is in our environment variable file. We put it there, so don't worry about it. Okay, after that, I'm going to go ahead and define the database or DB first. So const DB equals, now we use Drizzle and we pass in SQL that we defined above. And then we simply export DB. But just above this, I want to put a note as well. So if you need to log all of the SQL commands that run in your terminal, in your Node.js terminal, like when you'd hit control backtick like this, and see a log of what was running, you can do that, and this would be the place to do it. So here I'll put logger, and if we were going to do that, we would just set this up a little bit differently. It would be const db equals, we would have Drizzle, you'd pass in SQL, but then you can give it some options here and just say logger equals true. So it might be handy during development or sometime when you're trying to figure something out to, instead of just using this simple connection here that is created, to go ahead and add the logger true option. So I want to leave that in just as a reference for you. And now we're ready to create our data schema. So in this same folder, I'll create a new file and name it schema.ts. Now at the top, we're going to import quite a few things here. So we'll import PG table that we'll use to create a table. We also want some data types that we'll import from Drizzle. So I want serial, I want varchar, and then Boolean, also timestamp, and then integer, and finally text. And now this is all going to come from Drizzle ORM slash PG core. Now Alt Z to wrap that down. And then on the next line, we'll import relations, as we'll map out some relations between our two tables from Drizzle ORM. Okay, we've got the imports complete. Let's start on the customers table. So we'll say export const customers, set this equal to PG table, and now we'll say this table is going to be named customers. And now inside this object, we can map out the type of data and the data columns that our table will have. So we'll start with ID, and that will be serial. That would be the ID type. And then it's going to be the primary key of the table. So we can just identify that right there. And you notice how Drizzle is working. We're going to be using dot notation here afterwards, and then just chaining some different properties here that we put on the data. So now I'll say first name, and this is varchar, and this is first name. By the way, is it varchar, varchar? I just say it however like that. And then it's not null, because we're going to require there to be a first name. And then we could just copy that down essentially. So Shift Alt and the down arrow, and we could change first here and press Control D to get the next one, change it to last, because that's very much the same. After that, we're going to have an email, and this would also be that varchar and then email. But here we're going to chain unique. So there could only be one email that is in the database, and nothing else could be identical to it. And also not null, because we'll require that of the customers. Phone will be very similar. I need to type phone correctly. One thing is, if you do use an AI assistant, they are very good at typing out schemas like this, and then I just check them, because this is a repetitive task, and AI is pretty good at repetitive tasks. So address 1, I'm going to have two address lines here. So varchar and then address 1. I'll say this one is not null, but the next one, if I go Shift Alt and the down arrow, the next one can be null, because not everybody's going to have a second address line. Of course, TypeScript is telling us we've already got one named address 1. This needs to be address 2. Okay, after that, city, state, zip. So we'll go city, and that is that varchar again, city. And now this would also be required, so not null. And now state, we can put another restriction on that. So instead of just saying, hey, this is the state, we can then put in a little option here that says the length is going to be 2. This is also required, so not null. And then zip, we'll do something similar there, because the zip, and this would be like a US zip code, for example. So they could be up to 10 digits, I believe. Let's put in length 10. So you're not requiring it to be 10 digits. You're just saying it's going to be no more than. Essentially, you're reserving up to 10 digits for that data. It's not null. And after the zip, we're also going to have notes for customers. Now this is the text type. Say that's notes. After that, active, and now this would be Boolean. Is the customer active or not? We don't usually want to delete old customers or delete old history. We would more or less mark them inactive so we could keep that customer history. This will also be not null. Then we'll set some default data here. So the default is true. So if we don't provide a value for active, it will just automatically be true. Then created at, give that a timestamp, call it created at. Now we'll say not null, and then default now. Now let's copy that down. So Shift Alt and the down arrow. And this is going to be updated at. Then there's something else we can add here as well. So I need to change updated again. I should have just selected both. After the default now, we can chain one more thing here, and this is a $ on update. And now this accepts a function. So when this data is updated in this field, updated, it calls this function. So we can just set the new date right there. And that way, you don't always have to provide that when you update the data. It's going to happen automatically because of that on update that is called. So I think we've defined our customers table right there. And you can see how this helps. Now, Drizzle is type safe. So we have put in the different types of data that we're going to have here. And then we'll be able to reference this later in our project when we reference this data that is coming in from this table. And now the tickets table, it's not quite as big, but let me just select all of the customers table, then do Shift Alt and the down arrow to copy that down. Now I'll put a blank line in between, and I'm going to change customers to tickets, and then let's just delete some in between that is not going to be there. So we've got an ID, a created at, and an updated at. That's all the same. But now the tickets are going to reference a customer ID. That would be the relationship here. So this is an integer type, and this references customer underscore ID. And now we're going to say this is not null, and this is going to reference, but we call references here, and it accepts a function. As we arrow over here, we put customers referencing the table .id, saying what field it is referencing. Okay, after the customer ID, we're going to have a title. That is varchar title, and then we want this to be not null as well when a ticket is created. Then the description. So this could be longer. We'll once again make this a text type. It could be null, hopefully not, but it could be if we wanted to just have a title. Then we'll have a completed field. This would be a Boolean once again. Call this completed. So it's either completed or not. We'll have not null. And then we'll put a default value here of false. So when a ticket is open, of course, it shouldn't be immediately completed. Then we're going to assign a tech, one of the employees, to the ticket. But of course, when it's first created, it wouldn't be assigned. So we need to consider that as well, or at least have a default value for when they're first created. So let's set the default here to unassigned. After that, I think we're finished. The rest is completed for us because we already had created at and updated at. And of course, tickets also have an ID with a primary key. Okay, if we scroll up, we can see we used all of the imports here on this first line, but we didn't use relations yet. And that's because we need to define the relationships between these two tables. And maybe a little harder to understand, not quite as much typing, but let's just talk about it for a second, and hopefully that will increase the understanding of these relationships. So customers can have many tickets. You could have a repeat customer that comes back and has more repair tickets over the course of months and years as they're your customer. However, each repair ticket created is only going to have one customer. So you've got one customer, many tickets, and then one ticket to one customer when you think about the relationships. So let's define that here. We'll say export const customers relations. Now this equals relations, and then we reference the customers table again. Now let's come down to the next line, and here we can deconstruct many, and this function will continue from there. We'll have our parentheses and a curly bracket. Then we'll say tickets. Now we'll have many, and we'll pass in tickets right there. This is defining the relationship. So customers can have many tickets. And this is how Drizzle defines this. Now, if we come down below, the tickets are going to look a little different. So we'll say export const tickets relations. Set this equal to relations. Now we'll pass in the tickets table, go down to the next line. Now, when we destructure here, we use one instead of many. So one ticket to one customer. And now we'll have our parentheses, curly brackets again, and we'll say customer. Now here we'll use one, and we'll pass in the customers table. And let's start with a curly brace here, but let's go down to the next line and we'll say fields. I could spell fields correctly. Now inside fields, we'll have a bracket here like an array, and we'll say tickets dot customer ID. It's just referencing that one. Then after fields, we have references and another bracket and customers dot ID. And again, a comma after that, and we should be good to go. So you can see here for the tickets, one ticket references one customer, and then we're saying with customer, the customer's table, specifically the field is the customer ID and it references the customer. Well, the tickets table, customer ID, references customer's ID field when you look at it that way. Okay, so there's the relationships. We have completed our schema. We've defined both tables and the relationships for those tables. Okay, we've saved that file. There is one more to create here in this spot, and it is called Migrate.ts. Now we use this file as a dev tool after we generate the SQL code with Drizzle. We will then migrate the code to Neon to apply those changes. Now, if you haven't previously generated or migrated code to a backend database before, this could be something all new, but don't worry, we'll go through all of that. So let's just create the files first. We're going to import DB, which if you remember, that's our DB connection. That comes from /index. It's right there in that index file in the same folder that we're in. Then we're going to import migrate. This is going to come from, let's use double quotes to just stay consistent, drizzle-orm/neon-http/migrator. Okay, now we've got the imports complete. Let's just define this, and we'll call the function main equals async anonymous function. Now inside the function, we'll have a try catch. So in the try, we'll await migrate that we imported above, and we'll pass in the DB connection. And then inside this options object here, we'll say migrations folder, and we're saying where this is. Now we're going to give this basically an absolute path because I am not sure if it accepts a relative path or not. So it's in the source directory, in the DB directory, and then it's going to create a folder called migrations. So it will be right here in this same DB folder that we have our other files in. I like to keep it all together. Some like to keep it separate outside of the source file, but I'm going to have it right here. You could locate this in a different spot if you wanted to, but we'll need to come back and reference that as well. Okay, after you do that, if you wanted to actually console log something to say it's completed, because remember, this is a dev tool, so we'll be running this in our console. Just control backtick, open it up, take a look at the console. That's where we're going to run it. So we might want to put a message for ourselves to just say it's complete. Migration completed is a good message. And of course, this is awaited. It's an async function, so we shouldn't see this message until after it has awaited that result. Now let's go ahead and have our catch with the error. And now here I'm going to console the error instead of sending this to Sentry or doing anything else. And most of this entire project, you're not going to see me do this. But once again, this is a dev tool. I'm going to run this migration in the terminal window, and if there's an error, I'm going to want to see it in the terminal window as well. So here I'm going to say console.error, and this is going to be error during migration. Let's give a little space and a comma, and let's just put the error right there. Now after this, let's also put process.exit 1, and that just cleans clearly and cleanly exits the process. Okay, now down at the bottom, we need to call this function. We could define it here, but it wouldn't do anything unless we went ahead and called it. So we just call the main function at the end when the migrate file is ran. So let's save this as well. Okay, we've created the three main files here inside of our new DB directory that's inside of the source directory. That's great. There's one more key file that we need to complete before we can do anything with Drizzle, And that goes in our root here, the same level that we would have our Next.js config, our TS config, our user stories. So I'm just going to click on user stories, then click new file. And this needs to be called drizzle.config.ts. And that's a very specific name that Drizzle will look for. So make sure you name it that exact name, drizzle.config.ts. Now inside of this, we're going to import define config, and that's going to come from drizzle-kit. Okay, after that import, we'll say export default. We'll have define config. Now inside of that, we start an object inside the parentheses, and we define the config for Drizzle. So we say where the schema is. This is going to be in the source directory, then in the DB directory. Then we had schema.ts. After that, we define where the migration output report goes. So this is going to go in the source directory, in the DB directory, and it's going to create a directory inside of that DB directory named migrations. So when we generate that SQL code that needs to migrate to Neon, that's where it's going to go. After that, we need dialect. This is going to be Postgres, how do you pronounce that actually? I always just say Postgres or PostgreSQL, but it's all one word. I suppose there is a correct way to do it. Somebody enunciate it for me, like break it out in the comments. Okay, after dialect, DB credentials. And here, this is an object, and we'll say URL. And now this is where we once again pass that connection string, because this needs the connection string to go ahead and migrate those changes to the database. Okay, this looks great. We're almost ready to create our Neon database tables using generate and migrate. But before we do that, instead of just typing those commands in a terminal window, I want to go ahead and put them in the package.json as scripts, because they are commands that we're probably going to use again and again through the lifetime of this project. So under scripts, I'm going to put a comma after lint. I'm going to add a couple of new scripts here. So I'm going to start with db, lowercase, and then colon, generate. And now after that, put the command. So drizzle-kit generate. And I'll put a comma here, and then db colon migrate. And after that, we'll use tsx to execute that migrate file. And remember, we added tsx as a dev dependency. Then I'm going to put the path where the migrate file is. So /source/db/migrate.ts. Okay, we've added our two scripts. I believe we're ready to use them. And note, before we use these scripts, especially the migrate one, make sure you have that connection string from Neon in your .env.local file, like I have walked you through setting up, because it's going to use that connection. First, we'll just use generate to generate the actual SQL commands that will be sent to the Neon database. So let's do that first. We'll pop open the terminal window with control in the backtick. Then I'll type npm run db generate, just like we added in the script. Once we do that, it says it created two tables, so customers and tickets, 13 columns, 8 columns. Excellent. One foreign key here because tickets is related back to customers. After that, it says your SQL migration file. So this is the file. These are the commands that are going to be sent to Neon. So let's scroll up and look inside of our database, our DB directory. And you can see we now have a migrations folder here. So let's click inside of that. And you can see it says inside of migrations, that file starts with 4 zeros. Well, here it is. It also created a meta directory inside there. Not too concerned about what's in the meta directory, but it does track some things. It essentially tracks the changes. So the next time you want to generate changes, it already knows what has happened in the past and it won't regenerate those. So you can see here's the actual SQL command. It says create table, and then it gives a breakpoint. Then it creates the next table, has a little breakpoint, and then it has some more commands down here as well. So nice. This will execute these commands for us. We never want to make changes directly in Neon, never make any changes directly to our database. We always want to generate and then migrate those changes. So now that we've seen the migration file, what it's going to send that we looked at here, let's go ahead and send those commands to Neon. So we'll type npm run db migrate and press enter. And it should send those commands, and hopefully everything works out as we planned. Well, here's our console log message, migration completed. Let's go back to our Neon dashboard and see if those tables have been created in our project. Okay, I'm back in Neon where we left off last time. Here's our project dashboard. So I'll just click dashboard, and here's the project itself. Let's scroll down here and we see branch, and here is tables. So let's click tables. And yes, we have customers and we have tickets. Now, both of these tables are empty, no rows. Now, we're not limited to 50 total rows either. That's just how many can be on one page. You can see there's pagination. So if we had, say, 100, there would be 2 pages of results here that we would see. You can scroll right and left to see all of the columns, but we just have no data so far. But we did create both tables. Now, of course, we'll set up forms to add data through our application instead of needing to add it here record by record in the table. But you see Neon does allow you to add records. So we could click add record and it would bring one up here where we could start filling in each piece of data as needed. So that is nice. But they also have a SQL editor over here where you can run commands, and I could just click new query. And if I had an insert statement, I would be ready to insert some test data. And as a matter of fact, I do. Let's quickly go back to VS Code. Back in VS Code, I'm going to close the terminal window. Now, something I'm going to provide for this lesson, which is lesson number 3, is another directory here in your code for the lesson. So let me just create it here at the root level. And this is going to be called data. I'm going to put in a couple of .sql files. So here is the first one, and it's going to be called customers.sql. And this is going to have a SQL statement to insert some data. So if I press Alt-Z and wrap it down, you can see I've got 5 customers here that are being inserted if you run this. So you should be able to find this in the course resources. Now I'm going to add one more that is called tickets, and it's going to add about 3 tickets per customer here. So let's go to the create one more new file, tickets and .sql. And again, you don't need to create these now. You can just download them from the course resources. So you don't want to have to type this in. Another good thing another thing you can use AI for is to create test data like this. It's pretty easy to generate using ChatGPT or some other AI solution. Okay, so here's my insert statement for the tickets. Now let's save that as well. Now let's copy customers. We need those first, and Control A to copy the entire file, or Control A to select the entire file, Control C to copy. Now let's go back to Neon. Okay, I'm back in my Neon project and I'm at the SQL editor here and I'm ready to run this insert statement. So I just click inside of this area here and Control V to paste, and here is that insert statement. I'm going to click run, and there is an error. We have column address 2 of relation customers does not exist. And this means I made a mistake inside of that schema file. So this is going to be a great way to learn about generating a change, migrating that change, and then we'll try this again. So I'll leave this for now. Let's go back to VS Code and look at the schema file, and we should be able to scroll down here into our DB directory and then find schema. And let's look at address 2. Yes, when I copied that down, I changed the name here, but I didn't change it here. So they both say address 1. So it never created address 2. So I'll copy that, paste it right there. So now I've got address 2 defined. Let's make sure I didn't make any other mistake like that when I copied things down. Easy to do, of course. Looks like everything is fine. So let's save that change. Now we need to generate and migrate once again. So let's open up a terminal window, and then I want to type npm run db generate. It's going to create another file. You can see this one's now 0001. When we look over here in our migrations directory, we now have 2 files. Let's look at this. Yes, it doesn't do anything that it previously did. It's just altering that one to say, hey, we've got address 2 here as well. So this should make the change we need. Let's go ahead and open a terminal once again and npm run db migrate. And yes, migration's completed. Let's go back and look at Neon and check the table structure now to see if we have address 1 and address 2. So if we scroll over, and it just still says address 1. Let me try refreshing everything here. That might make a difference because we were there before. Oh, you know what? It might be at the end now since it was created after. So city zip notes created at, updated at, here it is, address 2. I probably didn't need to refresh it that other time. So anytime you add something, and that was like adding a new column, it was just put here at the end. That doesn't mean we can request the data in any order we want to, but it's just down here at the end. So there is our address 2. We shouldn't have an issue now when we come back to the SQL editor. Still has this same command for inserting customers in it. Let's try to run it again. And statement executed successfully. And look at this, using AI, they name this for us in the history. Insert multiple customers with detailed information. So they know what we did already. Looks great. Let's look at it now when we look at the table view. And here you can see our customers. So IDs 1 through 5, first, last name, email, phone, address, city, state, zip, and of course notes, whether they're active or not when they're created. And if anybody had a second address line, it's down here at the end. So we do have all of that information is in the database. Our tickets are still empty. Let's go back and get our tickets command. We have in here inside of the data directory that I'm leaving for you in this lesson. I'll close the terminal window, Control A to select, Control C to copy. Now we'll go back to the Neon dashboard. SQL editor, we're ready for a new query, and I'll paste this in with Control V. Now we're ready to insert all of these tickets for some more test data. Let's run this. Statement executed successfully, and now we see it in the history as well. So insert multiple customer support tickets. Now, if you wanted to save these, you could as well. You can pull them back up by clicking on them here in the history. And there is a saved list as if there were queries that you were going to run, possibly for reports or anything else you just wanted to check multiple times, you could save it over here. But that puts in all of the data that we need to test things out in the app as we develop different things. And of course, we'll also work on inserting our own data through the app. And here's all 15 tickets that we added now, and you can scroll through and see those changes. You should explore Neon and check out everything they have to offer. Great docs as well. So many things you can do with a database, and we're keeping it fairly simple, but they have a great dashboard here. It's so easy to work with the data. So I love being able to come in and possibly edit a table right here if I wanted to, or if I didn't want to edit a table right here, I can add a new record, or I can go to the SQL editor and make any changes with the SQL language directly that I want to make as well. Now in the next lesson, we'll start working with React Hook Form, Zod, and ShadCN as we create type-safe forms and form inputs for our application. A quick shout out to my patrons. Holy Coder is a progress provider. Sean Lynch is a senior patron. And my junior patrons, Programming Polyglot, Isaac, Will, Ernie, Georgie, Stacy, Abe, Javier, Michael. Thank you all so very much. You're helping me reach my goals. Find out more about how you can join my Patreon at patreon.com/davegray. Remember to keep striving for progress over perfection, and a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you, and thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.